Hello and welcome all to this new episode where we discuss many more things. Yes, Dipesh Chakraborty, yes, Bruno Latour, but having recently seen Mike Leigh's powerful rendering of the events leading up to and including the so-called, Peterloo massacre on 16th August 1819, I revisited the poem Percy Shelley wrote as a direct and angry response to those events, a poem Richter Holmes and Paul Foote have called the greatest poem of political protest ever written in English. In my 20s, I spent several years writing a PhD thesis on Shelley's work, more on his ideas about language than a conventional literary critique of the poems. So it's a curious pleasure coming back to the poem after all these years. And perhaps it does not seem in need of much explanation. Written as it was so self consciously to reach as wide an audience as possible to achieve its political impact. Yet its driving ballad like form hardly gives the reader time to reflect, and there are areas of obscurity within it. Apparently, real uncertainty on Shelley's part. Of course, the political climate at the time, at Leigh's film so vividly demonstrates, was increasingly repressive in regard to any speech or publication in favor of reform. Even the radical Leigh Hunt, to whom Shelley sent the poem from his exile in Italy, refused to risk publication. The poem eventually saw the light of the day only after the Reform Bill had been passed in 1832. A Voice from Exile. The whole poem is notable for the multiple distances Shelley maintains from the actual events of August 1819. There is no poetic reportage of any kind, though he had read several newspaper accounts. In his own remote position, he had fled England in 1818, never to return, and in the way in which the poem comments on political realities through the filters of ballad form and caricature and the sophisticated layering of voices. The opening quatrain briskly deals with the geographical distance, though with something of the air of a fairy tale. As I lay asleep in Italy, there came a voice from over the sea, and with great power it forth led me to walk in the visions of poesy. I read again. As I lay asleep in Italy, there came a voice from over the sea, and with great power it forth led me to walk in the visions of poesy. The AAAA rhyme here announces the poem with a series of thumbs like an overture to wake his listeners and perhaps also himself from his guilt ridden sleep. So far distant from the causes of political reform and revolution that he had long supported in England, the visions of poetry immediately give license to the strange encounters that follow. The triumphal parade of anarchy, the kind of Gothic caricature that dominates the following stanzas, has often been linked to the style of political cartoons by Hogarth and Gilray. But Shelley's adolescent love of the Gothic genre is well known, and the resulting mix is all his own. The reader accompanying the narrator's walk is thrown into a paradox of characters who precede the climactic appearance of the personification of anarchy himself. This is the triumph of anarchy in the sense used by the Romans as a victorious parade through city streets. The narrator meets three main figures: murder, fraud, and hypocrisy. Reversing the usual metaphor of personification, each abstract figure wears a mask in the guise of a contemporary politician, the Foreign Secretary, and Cathlarig and Lord Chancellor, Eldon and the Home Secretary, Sidmouth. The satirical effect of these masks is driven home by the figure's actions, and Cathelred feeds human hearts to the dogs that follow him. Eldon sheds tears that turn into millstones, and children have their brains knocked out by them. And Sidmouth, clothed equivocally by both Bible and knight, rides only on a crocodile, more false tears. Get it? So Shelley glancingly refers to many more distractions traipsing along in this masquerade, and they are all disguised, even to the eye, like bishops, lawyers, peers, or spies. The enemies of the people are therefore boldly named, and it's clear that the poem's title contains a pun on mask, or mask alluding to the paper thin disguises that the abstractions of corruption and injustice wear, as well as the arrogant self regarding performance of the triumph or parade they are taking about in. The climax of this parade is the approaching apocalyptic figure of anarchy himself. And I quote, "Last came anarchy, He rode on a white horse, splashed with blood. He was pale even to the lips, like death in the apocalypse, and he wore a kingly crown, and in his grasp a scepter shone on his brow. This mark I saw, I am God and King and law. Anarchy here means a state of lawlessness in which the rich and powerful are freely able to control all religious, state, and legal power. Their laws preserve their own freedom to exploit. We will see a bit later that Shelley had a concept of the old laws of England that he believed had been overridden but that once had served to protect the lives of ordinary people. Now, England under anarchy's rule. Shelley's poem broadcasts and accelerates the trope of the parade with a pace stately and fast to show the appalling results of this rule of the rich and powerful across the whole country. There are echoes here of the charges into the crowd at St. Peter's Field in Manchester, and a mighty troop around, with their trampling shook the ground, waving each a bloody sword for the service of their lord. Their lord here is anarchy himself, whose peasant is now seen to be passing through England, drunk as with intoxication of the wine of desolation. It lays waste of everything, tearing up and trampling down. Eventually arriving in London, ordinary citizens feel terror and panic while the supporters of anarchy flock to him, repeating the slogan and self announcement written across his brow. Those who flock to his side are lawyers and priests, and I quote, the hired murderers who did sing, "Thou art God and law and king. We have waited, we can loan for thy coming, mighty one. Our purses are empty, our swords are cold. Give us glory and blood and gold." Anarchy bows in response to the obeisance with a false and aristocratic grace, as if his education had cost 10 millions in the nation, and recognizes the basis of his power are secure in palaces and quickly to be seized in the Bank of England and the Tower of London, after which he anticipates meeting with a compliant pensioned parliament to further confirm the rule of anarchy in the England of 1890. Hope and the mysterious shape. But as Shelley's sentence crossed the next stanza break, without any clear pause, the seemingly unstoppable parade of bloodshed, inequality, injustice, and hypocrisy is strangely interrupted by a counter personification. A crazed looking young woman, a maniac maid, runs out declaring that her name is Hope, though the narrator says she looked more like despair. The perception here is interesting, as even Shelley's narrator has been so infected by the toxic atmosphere spread by anarchy that the girl who is soon to bring about a challenge to anarchy looks to be insane and more resembles the absence of hope than otherwise. This is one of Shelley's core political beliefs and had already appeared in the closing lines of Prometheus Unbound. Their Demogorgon urges optimism in the long term conflict with abusive power, to hope till hope creates from its own wreck the thing it contemplates. The movement from reform will, it seems, have to come close to despair or its own wreck before the powers of anarchy are likely to be defeated. Hope's father is time, whose other children, these are the previous occasions when the cause of liberty and reform had been strong, are covered in the dust of death. So time has brought forth a new opportunity, though the actions of the young woman called Hope are surprising. Less Joan like, more Christ like, she simply lies down before the trampling hooves of the triumph of anarchy. But moments before she too is about to be trampled into dust. Between her and her foes, a mist, a light, an image rose, small at first and weak and frail, like the vapor of a veil. This mist, later called a shape, is one of the mysteries of the poem's politics. Hope provokes its appearance, at first weak, it gathers in strength. Shelley compares it to the clouds that gather like tower-crowned giants striding fast and glare with lightnings as they fly and speak in thunder to the sky. In the next few stanzas, it becomes more soldierly arrayed in mail compared to the scales of a snake. For Shelley, the snake was usually an image of just rebellion, not of evil. Yet it is also winged. It wears a helmet with the image of the planet Venus on it. It moves softly and swiftly, a sensed but almost unseen presence, and rather than any military action or campaign of civil disobedience, this shape, conjured by hope, creates thinking. As flowers beneath May's footstep waken, as stars from night's loose hair are shaken, as waves arise when loud winds call, thought sprung wherever that step did fall. The shape has variously been interpreted as liberty, England, the people, revolution, nature, intellectual illumination. But I think the image of Venus suggests that the shape is love, which in Shelley's A Defense of Poetry is synonymous with the imagination, the expression of which is poetry. Poetry here is a cultural and perceptual shift. Artists and writers are merely one aspect of its manifestations. At its heart is a rejection of reason which perceives and depends on differences and the embrace of a mode of perception that favors similitude, including the similitude between all people and classes. Now, the death of anarchy. How exactly love, so broadly defined, brings about the dramatic consequences detailed in the next few stanzas is unclear. There seems to be evidence of a battle as Hope is suddenly seen walking calmly through ankle deep in blood, and Anarchy himself is reduced to dead earth upon the earth. In the light of the bloodshed at Peterloo, such actual conflict and resulting casualties are hardly surprising, but the use of force by those seeking political reform seems to contradict Shelley's later pronouncements in the poem. The only alternative is that the blood she wades through is that split by power associated with anarchy. Yet, in this calm aftermath of these events, there comes a sense of renovation, a sense awakening and yet tender, was heard and felt, and most importantly, there are further words. This time, the speaker is unclear, though it is as if the earth itself, the mother of English men and women feeling such bloodshed on her brow, translates this split blood into a powerful, irresistible language, an accent unwithstood. Shelley repeats as if once more, confirming the mystery of this voice, a voice which proceeds now to speak the whole of the remainder of the poem. For Shelley, poetry in his broad sense is vitally metaphorical, and the earth's imagined speeches convey a sense that the cause of liberty is in accordance with the truly understood, surely Rousseauistic nature of creation. At the end, I will finish by reading the poem because Percy V.C. Shelley's language is so fascinating, so intoxicating, so drug like. So I lay. As I lay asleep in Italy, there came a voice from over the sea, and with great power it forth led me to walk in the visions of poesy. I met Marder on the way. He had a mask like Caslareth, very smooth he looked, yet grim. 7 bloodhounds followed him. All were fat and well they might be in admirable plight, for one by one and two by two he tossed the human hearts to chew, which from his white choke he drew. Next came Fraud, and he had on like Eldon and ermined gown. His big tears, for he wept well, turned to milestones as they fell. And the little children who round his feet played to and fro, thinking every tear a gem, had their brains knocked out by them, clothed with the Bible as with light and the shadows of the night, like Sidmouth, next Hypocrisy on a crocodile rode by, and many more distractions played in this ghastly masquerade, all disguised even to the eyes like bishops, lawyers, peers, and spies. Last came Anarchy. He rode on a white horse, splashed with blood. He was pale even to the lips, like death in the apocalypse. And he wore a kingly crown, and in his grasp a sceptre shone. On his brow this mask I saw, I am God and King and Law. With a pace stately and fast, over England, over English land he passed, trampling to a mire of blood the adoring multitude. And a mighty troop around with their trampling shook the ground, waving each a bloody sword for the service of their Lord. And with glorious triumph they rode through England proud and gay, drunk as with intoxication of the wine of desolation. Over fields and towns from sea to sea passed the peasant swift and free, tearing up and trampling down till they came to London town, and each dweller, panic-stricken, felt his heart with terror stricken, hearing the tempestuous cry of the triumph of anarchy. For with pomp to meet him came, clothed in arms like blood and flame, the hard martyrers who did sing, Thou art God and Law and King. We have waited weak and lone for thy coming, mighty one. Our purses are empty, our swords are cold. Give us glory and blood and gold. Lawyers and priests, a motley crowd, to the earth their pale brows bowed, like a bad prayer not over loud, whispering, Thou art Lord and God. Then all cried with one accord, Thou art King and God and Lord. Anarchy, to thee we bow, be thy name made holy now. And Anarchy, the skeleton, bowed and grinned to everyone as well as if education has cost 10 millions to the nation, for he knew the palaces of our kings were rightly his. He is the scepter, crown and globe, and the gold inwoven robe. So he sent his slaves before to seize upon the bank and tower, and was proceeding with intent to meet his pensioned parliament. When one fled past a maniac maid, and her name was Hope, she said, but she looked more like despair, and she cried out in the air, "My father, time is weak and grey with waiting for a better day. See how idiot like he stands, fumbling with his palsied hands. He has had child after child, and the dust of death is piled over everyone but me. Misery, oh misery." Then she lay down in the street, right before the horse's feet, expecting with a patient eye murder, fraud, and anarchy. When between her and her foes a mist, a light, an image rose, small at first, and weak and frail, like the vapor of a veil, till as clouds grow on the blast, like tar-crowned giants striding fast, and glare with lightning as they fly, and speak in thunder to the sky. It drew a shape arrayed in mail, brighter than the viper's scale, and upborne on wings whose grain was as the light of sunny rain. On its helm, seen far away, a planet like the morning's lay, and those plumes its lights rained through like a shower of crimson dew. With step as soft as a wind, it passed over the heads of men so fast that they knew the presence there, and looked, but all was empty air. As flowers beneath May's footsteps weaken, as stars from night's loose hair are shaken, as waves arise when loud winds call, thoughts sprung when ever that step did fall. And the prostrate multitude looked, and ankle deep in blood, Hope, that maiden Maya serene, was walking with a quiet mien. And Anarchy, the ghastly birth, lay dead up earth upon the earth. The horse of death, tameless as wind, fled as with his hoofs did grind, to dust the murderers thronged behind. A rushing light of crowds and splendor, a sense awakening and yet tender, was heard and felt, and at its close these words of joy and fear arose. As if their own indignant earth, which gave the sons of England birth, had felt their blood upon her brow, and shuddering with a mother's throe, had turned every drop of blood by which her face had been bedewed to an accent unwithstood, as if her heart had cried aloud. Men of England, heirs of glory, heroes of unwritten story, nursling of one mighty mother, hopes of her and one another. Rise like lions after slumber, in unvanquishable number. Shake your chains to earth like dew, which sleep had fallen on you. Ye are many, they are few. The end. I thank you all to stay with us.